Small businesses are at the heart of the U.S. economy. Here at Nurture Small Business Podcast, we're dedicated to seeing our small business owners succeed. I am your host, Denise Cagan, president of DCA Virtual Business Support. If you like what you hear on today's podcast, please share it. You have my gratitude for doing so. Today, we're going to talk about the Small Business Administration. As a small business owner myself, I have relied on resources such as the SBA, professional associations and networks, and other various professional development opportunities, including the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. Many business owners, particularly over the last 2 years, have had contact with the SBA when they've applied for the PPP loans and EIDL loans to weather the effects of the pandemic. My guests today include Janetta King, Regional Director of 10KSB Voices, and Dane Stangler, Director of Strategic Initiatives of the Bipartisan Policy Center. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I am going to go ahead and start off with Janetta, and I promise, Dane, I'm going to get to you. You have a very unique background. You wove government, politics, and business all together, both on a national and statewide platform. Would you share a bit more about your background?
Of course. Well, thank you for having us today to have this conversation. I feel very privileged to be able to work for 10,000 Small Businesses Voices, because what we get to do is small business advocacy. And my background really did kind of all culminate to this opportunity because I did have the good fortune of being able to work on Capitol Hill, to be able to serve as a policy director for a governor. And I was really called to public service because I thought, and I still do think, government can do good for people, but we have to make sure we are engaged in the process. And so I'm able to take those experiences working on the inside of government and support small business owners who want to influence and make an impact and reform and communicate with government so that they can succeed in their small businesses.
Perfect. Now, Dane, your bio was no less impressive, and you are a columnist for Forbes.com and have written multiple articles on policy for several other publications. How did you wind up in this business policy arena?
Thanks, Denise, and delighted to be here speaking with you and Janetta. So I've worked on entrepreneurship and small business issues for a long, long time. I spent 12 and a half years at the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City, which is, among other things, dedicated to helping and supporting entrepreneurs. I've worked on those issues in a variety of other contexts. As you mentioned, I do have the privilege of writing a column for Forbes specifically on small business and entrepreneurship. And now with the Bipartisan Policy Center, exactly as the name suggests, we are dedicated to working with policymakers on both sides of the aisle to come to agreement on different policy issues, one of which, of course, is small business and entrepreneurship, which is usually very bipartisan.
Perfect. I love that. And I love that bipartisan aspect and marrying together with all of the small businesses. So as far as the SBA goes, the Small Business Administration, I think that a lot of small business owners think of it more as a capital resource for financial, and don't realize that there's also education programs and some other things that they do, some advocacy there as well. So a little bit of background about it. It was created in 1953 by President Eisenhower. And the last time it was fully reauthorized was in December 2000. Now that's 2 decades ago. Okay. It is an agency that represents less than 1% of the U.S. discretionary spending, yet is impactful to a demographic that has a huge impact on the U.S. economy, small businesses. So tell me, in simple terms, what does reauthorization mean for either of you?
I'll jump in first. Reauthorization is really just a fancy word for updating and modernizing, and Congress playing its role to make sure that the federal government and the agencies of the administration are in fact delivering those services that they're supposed to be delivering for the constituencies that they serve. And so if you go back to Government 101, you remember the different branches of government. And so the Small Business Administration is part of the executive branch. And so they're executing on a day-to-day basis these supports for small businesses. And Congress's role is to fund them, but also to authorize some of that spending. And so the Small Business Administration has, of course, been funded, since 2000, but it hasn't been reauthorized. And so Congress has not played that role of taking a look and asking those questions of how's the Small Business Administration performing? How are small businesses benefiting? And is it true to the original mission? What needs to be updated? What are some of those things that are not effective? And, as we think about 23 years passing without Congress having that conversation, you're a little bit baffled. Why would that be? And so we thought, okay, well, let's take a look and see how the small business reauthorization conversation happened prior to 2000. Is this 23 years the norm? And in fact, it's not. Every several years, the Small Business Administration was in fact reauthorized. So this is certainly an outlier with this 23 years. It's an outlier among other agencies in the federal government. As you can imagine, some agencies are reauthorized, about every year. Think about Department of Defense and other agencies. So we really do have an outlier here. And that's why we're really going to be leaning on Congress this coming year to take a good look at this agency, because as you said, Denise, it serves such an important population of our country. And there's really no excuse for not making sure that it's doing what it needs to do to support small businesses. Dane, would you have anything to add about reauthorization? It is a fancy DC word, but something I think can be understood if explained.
Yeah, thanks, Janetta. Exactly as you say, reauthorization is one of those technical Washington ideas. And I think when people hear it outside Washington, they might think, oh my God, the SBA is going to go away if it's not reauthorized. That is clearly not the case, as the SBA has continued to exist in the absence of formal reauthorization for the last 22 plus years. And this is part of Congress's job. This is part of the agency's job, is every few years to take a look at how things are going internally, take a look at how the external landscape might be changing, and what those changes could mean for the agency, and then to provide funding levels. Denise, as you suggest, SBA is in relative terms a tiny agency in the grand scheme of the federal budget. Yet it's got this mission, this sweeping mission of serving 30 million businesses, non-employers, employers, all across the country in every sector, every geography. So it's a tiny agency with a big mission. As you referenced, Denise, we're coming up at the end of July on the 70th anniversary of the official creation of SBA. So to Janetta's point, not only have we had this large period without formal reauthorization, not only has the external landscape for SBA changed pretty significantly in those 2 decades, especially in the last few years, as we saw lots of small businesses go through the pandemic. But now we have this nice anniversary coming up. So those are all the reasons that BPC and Voices have been pushing and will continue to push for reauthorization.
Perfect. Now, Janetta, would you please tell me a little bit about the 10,000 Small Businesses Voices and why Goldman Sachs launched the initiative in 2020?
Yes, it's a great question. 10,000 Small Businesses Voices builds on the Goldman Sachs Foundation program called 10,000 Small Businesses. And that's our education program. And our education program serves small businesses throughout the country. And you can think of it as almost a mini MBA, a 12-week intense curriculum that really allows a small business owner to take his or her business through this curriculum and end with a growth plan. These are all small business owners that want to grow, that want to create jobs, that want to, continue to build out their business. And so this is an education program primarily. It's been going for 10 plus years, sites all over the country. And we have this really amazing alumni community. So if you graduate from 10KSB, you join the ranks of approximately 14,000 other small businesses all across the country that also again want to grow and want to contribute. And as we continue to be in touch with those 14,000 small businesses through surveys and conversations, we ask them, what are they interested in doing now that they have graduated? We have this community. What could this community do together? And we heard time and time again, they were very interested in advocating. to making their voices heard together, collectively as we grew in numbers. And so that's why in 2020, Goldman Sachs launched 10,000 Small Businesses Voices as part of the alumni support offerings of our 10KSB education program. And since 2020, we've been able to do a lot of advocacy with our small business owners. So what does that look like? That looks like direct meetings with your elected officials. It looks like having small business owners speak to the media to tell their stories, doing policy reports and partnering with folks like Dane and the Bipartisan Policy Center so that we can make recommendations to Congress. And so all of those things that a small business on their own probably wouldn't be able to do because they are running their business day to day. They don't always have a seat at the table. And we're trying to meet our small business owners where they are, give them that seat at the table, give them that voice in Washington or at the state level or in their local community. Because one of the things that we also find from our surveys is that a lot of our small business owners, and overwhelmingly, I will say, don't believe the small business owners have a voice in Washington that is really effective. And I think we don't have to look, much further than the SBA not being reauthorized to really validate, how they feel. So that's what we're doing out of 10 KSB Voices. And if anyone is interested in looking into the 10 KSB education program, they can visit 10ksbapply.com. And we would love to have you join our ranks. And then, we would get to work on some of this advocacy when you're an alumni of the program.
Perfect. And I have had an opportunity to participate in those events as a Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business alumni. I love to see them, and they're great. The thing that a lot of people may not realize is it's not a group free-for-all where, you just have senators and representatives come in and speak to the group. Some of that occurs, but you actually get individual time with, Senator Kane. I got to meet him. I got to speak to, the late Representative McEachin, his aides. And so it is personalized. And I had the privilege of being able to lead a couple of the groups. So you definitely do have a voice, and I love it. Also, I'm a member of NAWBO, and they are great at being proactive for advocating for women small businesses. So we've talked about a lot of things so far, and a couple of questions come to mind. The partnership between the 10,000 Small Business Voices and the Bipartisan Committee, how did this come about?
I'll take the first stab at that question, and Dane, please jump in. So again, Voices has a community of all of these small business owners with very compelling experiences. And, what we hear from you all the time is recommendations of how government can work better to support small businesses. And so while that was really our strength in advocacy, it's helpful to take that next step and be able to make more specific recommendations about what policies need to change to be able to address those concerns of small businesses. And so that's where, we decided that we would like more capacity. We would like partners who have experience in policy research, in the process of, how to get changes made on Capitol Hill, with the administration. And we have a really great partnership now with the Bipartisan Policy Center, with their policy experts, with Dane and his team, so that we could really marry this army of small business owners with all of these compelling stories with policy research and recommendations that they can take to their elected officials and really give input to what they need. And so it's been a really great partnership. And Dane has done numerous focus groups with our alums. And so we really appreciate that this is not anyone's agenda other than the agenda of what we hear from our small business owners.
I love that. I love that. Dane, what can you add there?
We have been incredibly fortunate to have this partnership with the Voices team and with the small business owners. It's been hugely valuable for us, not just working with Janetta and the other folks at Voices, but also, as she references, hearing directly from those small business owners. Policymakers in Washington and state capitals like to visit with small businesses. Denise, it sounds like you've had the opportunity to do that, but it's, those are often you're not able to get in-depth discussions in a lot of those, meetings, receptions, whatever they are. And we've learned so much from having these focus groups, these roundtables with the small business owners. And, we're fortunate that we can take that feedback and their insights, backed Washington, backed policymakers. The core of BPC is getting things done. What can we get done in a bipartisan way? We are not interested in, putting out nice ideas that are probably never going to happen or only be attractive to one side or the other. It's a shared attitude with the Voices team of what can we get done on behalf of small business owners, despite small business being a very apple pie, very bipartisan issue. There's always going to be disagreements under the surface, right? When you get down to the details. Senator Marco Rubio, who was the chair of the Senate Small Business Committee in 2019, came really, really close to full SBA reauthorization. He, together with Senator Cardin, came very close. I would say, people would put it at they were 98% of the way there. But it didn't happen. It kind of fell apart over those exact, detailed disagreements that don't often make good press releases or good news stories or whatever it is. So the partnership with Voices is allowing us to dig into those kinds of details. How can we close that gap? What are the things beyond just everyone wants to support small business? What are the actual, substantive, detailed things that we need to figure out, we need to hash through in a bipartisan way?
So Dane, you mentioned, the details that kind of made it fall apart. I promise I won't ask you about that, but can you share some of the details that are in agreement that are things that, will make the SBA better?
Sure. So, beyond, general support, we need to help our small businesses. There is a lot of agreement, as kind of the reference to Senators Rubio and Cardin being so close in 2019. In our work in this, we're working on another report with the Voices team. It'll be due out in March, so next month. We're focusing on 3 areas where there is high-level agreement, even agreement on a lot of details, but maybe, they need a push on some of on the specifics. Those 3 areas are very core to SBA, access to capital being one, procurement and contracting being the second, and entrepreneurial development, so technical assistance being the third. There's lots of other things that go on at SBA beyond those 3 main things that we're not going to probably deal with. Disaster relief, exporting programs, we're not addressing them in this report, not because they're not important, but because we're going to focus on those 3 big areas where there is agreement, but also important remaining disagreements. So with access to capital, for example, there's definitely acknowledgement and recognition and agreement on both sides of the aisle that the financing market often doesn't work for small businesses. It's hard to access financing from a traditional institution, such as a bank or a credit union. And if and when small businesses turn to, non-depository, non-banks, they might have pretty broad access, but maybe at a much higher cost or harsher repayment terms. I don't think anyone in Washington on either side of the aisle would dispute that this is important and that it's a challenge. And they do agree that SBA has an important role to play through things like the 7A loan guarantee, the 504 loans, and some of the sub-programs within that. But there's very, when you get down to the actual programmatic workings, right, there's often disagreements over, should the government be subsidizing this? Should the government be supporting that, and how? But no one disagrees that 7A program, for example, is a linchpin of that access to capital support. I'll just talk about procurement really quickly and then turn it over to Janetta. Similarly, broad bipartisan agreement that not only is it important for the federal government to utilize small businesses in procurement and contracting because they can bring a lot that might be missing from much larger companies, it's also really important for small businesses. It can be a key customer, it can be really important for communities, it can be a really key way for certain types of small businesses and types of business owners to build wealth, to create jobs, and to support their communities. We've done a lot of work with Voices on small business procurement the last couple of years and have certainly found strong bipartisan agreement that the trends are moving in a way that's not kind, that's not friendly to small business contractors, that this is important to every part of the country, every type of small business. This is not a red state, blue state, issue, and that this needs to be addressed, and that there are certain actions, whether it's tweaks to procurement goals or, different programmatic improvements, that things need to happen to improve the procurement opportunities for small businesses.
Absolutely.
And I'll just jump in from the voices perspective. Dane did a great job laying out, some of the substance, and I'll just reiterate again, how we got to tackling this issue and those specific, ideas that Dane shared. And it really all goes back to our survey. And we just released a survey that really shows kind of what small business owners think about some of those programs that are delivered by the federal government. And so, while they're valued and they're very important, the small business owners that we surveyed, again, it was almost a couple of thousand of our alums who responded, and 70% of them give the U.S. federal government a C or below grade for effectiveness on the program, services, and tax credits available to small businesses. So I think there really is a large agreement that while we value these programs, our small business owners are saying they're not really effective right now. And we, need some reform. And additionally, when we asked, should the federal government be doing more to tailor programs and services to better reflect the realities and needs of small businesses, 96% said yes, that's something the federal government should be focused on. And 94% said, SBA needs a complete, reauthorization. So I think that with, this kind of information that we have from the small business owners, knowing, what they're saying that they need, coupled with the details that Dane and his team are providing based on this feedback, we're really hopeful that this agenda and these reforms will, find some common ground in Congress.
Absolutely. I love all this. And, I hear from a lot of small business owners, the things that they're looking for, they want more modern technology, starting with the website of the SBA, as well as how they guide business owners on technology, resources for women in business. So yeah, I love all this. I love that there's this partnership and that you basically have our back. I like that. So Dane, could you, tell me a little bit more about the report? So Janetta just told me about one report that we did have. You said there's another one coming out? What is this one for?
So we've had a very productive partnership with the Voices team, I think, over the last 2 years. Janetta, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this will be our 4th report together in a roughly 2-year time frame. We're scheduling it for release in mid-March. And Denise, things often work very slowly in Congress. That's not a bad thing. Sometimes they should work slowly if they're dealing with a really, serious issue. But the new Congress has just started, the 118th Congress. It won't be long before attention turns to, the 2024 presidential race, and politics will just kind of overtake policy. So we wanted to get this report out, or this next report out, early enough in the Congress, the new Congress, that we have a lot of time to work with small business owners, with other stakeholders, and with SBA and members of Congress on reauthorization and some of the subcomponents of that. There's a lot of milestones on the calendar. May is National Small Business Month. We're going to continue to work through that and really elevate that. July, as we mentioned, you've got the 70th anniversary of the establishment of SBA. So that's just kind of how we're looking at the calendar. So we want to get that report out so we can have repeated conversations with members of Congress, throughout, especially the next 12 months, and, lay groundwork for potential changes. As I mentioned, we're really targeting access to capital, procurement, and entrepreneurial development in this report. I can't stress enough how important the feedback from small business owners is and has been to this process of writing these reports and working with Congress. It's not the BPC way, and I don't think it's the Voices way to just sit at our desks and think, oh, wouldn't this be a nice idea? Or how about we do that? Of course, we consume research and we look at data and we talk to each other, but it would be not even half as effective if we weren't out there talking to the small business owners, talking to folks currently on the Hill in that SBA, but also a lot of former folks who dealt with these issues when they were there, and learning from them. Well, how did you do this and what didn't work there? So I really just want to stress how important all those conversations are, in addition to, your standard research and data analysis.
And as you mentioned, at some point this year, politics will take over policy, and we know that things will probably move smoother then. What do you think the prospects are for actually getting the SBA reauthorization through?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in. While you never know for sure, what happens on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, is certainly influenced by politics. We know this about small business issues. They tend to be very bipartisan. Small business owners are a group that everyone wants to support. And so when Denise, ask for those meetings with members of Congress, when we present the research on behalf of our small business owners, they are very engaged, and they want to know more, and they want to learn about the experiences of their constituents, and especially, this constituency. And as Dane said, they have been close before in previous years to reauthorizing the SBA. And so we're very hopeful that while this Congress might not agree on a lot, we think that they can agree on supporting small businesses. And I would say, especially in this moment, as I said, we do surveys of our small business owners. We ask them, where they are on policy issues, but we also ask them how they're feeling about their businesses in the current economy. How optimistic are they hiring? And right now, small business owners, despite the fact that they're being challenged with workforce and labor force issues, they're being challenged with inflation, they're nervous about a recession. They tend to be very optimistic about their businesses. And they're very certain, in fact, a majority that we found in our recent survey said that they're actually going to create jobs in 2023. So Congress should be supporting the job creators of 2023. Our small business owners are coming out of this recovery, ready to build. And we are going to be, talking to Congress about supporting them as they're creating jobs, in their communities. So we are hopeful. And we are also, Denise, very happy to have folks like you and others join in these advocacy efforts, because Dane and I and others, we can go to Capitol Hill and provide this data, but they really want to hear from their constituents. They really want to hear from those people in their communities. And so we have these good recommendations coupled with a very, very compelling, army of small business owners that are going to be the messengers to Congress. And so we, are optimistic because of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know when I participated in the event in July, there were 2,500 small business owners there meeting our congressmen and women. So, Dane, to you, another question. What other business legislation is moving right now?
That's a good question, Denise. I want to add on, if I can, to what Janetta talked about.
Absolutely.
Aspects of current Congress, and agree with her. Anyone putting money on Congress will do a certain thing by a certain date is probably going to lose most of the time. So it's hard for us to put a percentage on the chances of this, but we definitely share Janetta's optimism and the optimism of the Voices team, because we know, especially the four members of Congress for whom this falls into their jurisdiction as the leaders of the Small Business Committee, are dedicated to this, are dedicated to improving public policy for small businesses. We know Senator Cardin has made this a priority. He talked about SBA modernization at the Voices Summit last year. He introduced a package of bills under the banner of reauthorization in December. He's chair of Senate Small Business. We know Senator Ernst, who's the Republican ranking member on Senate Small Business, is committed to fixing some of these issues. She is passionate about, for example, fixing some of the procurement and contracting challenges. Congressman Williams, who's the new chair of House Small Business, he and his family have been business owners for years. So he's coming at this from that experience. He knows the challenges. He knows the importance of public policy support and public policy barriers. And of course, Congresswoman Velasquez has been the Democratic lead on the Small Business Committee for a long time. And we know she's committed to addressing some of these issues too. So we think, as Janetta said, the right moment is there, and we're gonna keep pushing for it. To your question, Denise, your question about other small business legislation moving or potentially moving is really important, because we talked about the SBA itself being a tiny agency with a very broad mission. The SBA is also just one element of government that matters to small businesses. Practically every federal agency has, more than one small business or entrepreneurship program. We know that there are big programs being run out of the Treasury Department, such as the State Small Business credit initiative that have huge impact for small businesses. That's even before you get to state government and local government, all of which have different small business programs. So it's really important for us to, we focus on SBA reauthorization to, exactly as you suggest, monitor other areas that are beyond the SBA's purview, but super important to small businesses. I'll just highlight a couple of things, something Congress got done and something that we hope will be attended to. What they got done in a bipartisan way at the end of the year, at the end of 2022, is what's called Secure 2.0. And Secure is an acronym that I'm not going to try to tell you what it stands for, as I've forgotten, but basically retirement security. This is Secure 2.0. Secure 1.0 was passed, I think, in 2017 or 2018. My BPC colleagues are going to be upset that I don't remember the exact year it was passed. But there were several provisions in Secure 2.0 passed in strong bipartisan fashion that aim at helping small businesses offer retirement plans for their employees. And we have a big retirement security team at BPC who worked hard on that and have been emphasizing to us that these changes are a very big deal for small businesses. And of course, importantly, they were bipartisan. Looking ahead, this month, actually, I believe, is the 30th anniversary of the passage of the Family Medical Leave Act.
Okay.
We know lots of small businesses offer paid leave to their employees. We know many more want to offer it, but they have a really hard time figuring out the costs, dealing with the logistics challenges. We know that in addition to paid leave, childcare is a huge challenge for small businesses. Not only for small businesses who want to support their employees who have children, but also for childcare providers, most of whom, 95% of whom, are small businesses and have a really hard time. I mean, you're on a nice edge when you're talking about operating in that sector. And there's very strong bipartisan support for helping small businesses on both those fronts, on paid leave and on childcare. So again, it'd be hard pressed to put a percentage probability on it, but we know Congress is paying attention to those issues. We know that they're important, again, when you look at things on the calendar like the FMLA anniversary. So those are things where BPC as a whole is working on and hopeful about.
Thank you for sharing that. I love all those initiatives. Those are things I've been hearing amongst small business owners. Those are things that are important to me. My workforce is primarily woman. It's a woman-owned business, so I do hear about childcare a lot. So I do know it, and I know that amongst other business owners that the same thing is going on. So we've talked about a lot today, covered a lot of ground. Hopefully we've sparked some interest in other business owners. How can they lend their voice?
Denise, I would just like to put a plug in for small business owners to kind of embrace advocacy. And advocacy really just means, speaking up for yourself in order to have an impact. And all small business owners should feel that they can and should be, advocates if they have an issue that they are interested in. And so being able to talk with those elected officials, that's really important. And I would just encourage any small business owner listening to look up the staff in your communities for those elected officials. As many people probably know, not only is there DC staff for each member of Congress, but there's a very large district staff that is dedicated to helping constituents. So these are people, in your communities that you could build a relationship with, both for, if you have a policy issue that you want to talk about, but as small business owners, you all have a lot coming at you, and you never know when you're going to need a champion. And so if you have a relationship with someone in those offices, it's easier to call and get a response and get some support when you do find yourself, in those situations. And so I would just encourage folks to, use their voice to make sure that their elected officials know what small businesses are experiencing. Being in government and working in government, you hear a lot from a lot of different constituencies. And so there are people who are making it a priority to get in the ear of their elected officials, but not all the time are the right people influencing those elected officials. And so we need to make sure that all voices are heard. And so all of our small business owners out there can do that, and you should do that.
Absolutely. How can we, Dane, do you have anything you want to add to that before I ask my last question?
The only thing I would add to supplement what Janetta said is, look, policymakers like us are human, and vivid stories, stick with them. I mean, for all of us, right? We stories can matter a lot more. It doesn't matter how many statistics we throw at them or, technical policy ideas. Those small business stories are critical in helping policymakers understand the interaction between small business owner experience and public policy.
Basic marketing stories. I get it. I totally get it. All right. So if a small business owner or anyone else who's listening today wants to learn more, where should they go? How should they reach out?
Denise, we have a website with some resources about our community and the things that we're working on. So you can see, some of the surveys, you can see some of the reports, other press releases, and that's at www.gs.com/10KSB-voices. And so we'll make sure that we provide that to you so your listeners can access that as well.
Perfect. And if people wanted to find out more about the 10KSB program, there's a different website.
That's right. That is 10KSBapply.com.
Perfect.
10KSBapply.com. And 10 is the number 10.
Okay, awesome. And Dane, is there anywhere specific where we should send people to find out information about the bipartisan committee?
So our website, bipartisanpolicy.org. So all words together, bipartisanpolicy.org. If you go to that and hit /small-business, we've kind of collected, I think most or if not all of our small business content on that page. So the reports we've done together with the Voices team, other issues we worked on that some of the small business owners who in your audience might be interested in. We've tried to collect everything there just for ease of use.
Perfect.
So bipartisanpolicy.org/small-business. Sorry, Denise.
Oh, no, you're fine. I will also make sure that those are in the show notes to make it very easy for people to find. The two of you have been great guests today. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules to join me and help educate our small business owners about how we can also have a voice.
Thank you so much for having us and giving us this platform to be able to tell you a little bit more about our efforts. Really appreciate it, Denise. And thanks for your leadership within our 10KSB Voices community. We can't do it without you all being willing to give the time to play that role. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me for today's Nurture Small Business podcast, where the focus is on business growth through technology, leadership, and people strategies. Do you have an idea for a podcast or feedback you'd like to share with me? Send me a note through my website at dcavirtual.com/contact.